Hello everybody and welcome to the first part of the Bash code along. In this I will just go through some general references. Now I am big on using the original source and not just getting your information off of Stack Overflow. Stack Overflow can give you a good place to look, but you really need to go back to the official source to see what all the syntax does, and because the only thing that's sure is that you'll end up having to change it eventually. Okay, so let's take a look at the official site. Okay, I guess you can say that you can return to this back as necessary to see what's new. Okay, reference site. Say hello. Yeah. Okay, and here's the reference site, and this is also the same thing for the history. The history's down here. Eventually, there we go. What is Bash? It gives you a quick overview of that, and I think I do that in another video, so I'm not going to belabor that. Okay, and it's important to know the history because a lot of times it tells you kind of what the idea was to make a language, and it's good to know the background because that way you can kind of fill in the blanks. If you don't specifically know something, you can kind of say, okay, well, I know what the intent of this is. It's kind of like when you talk about Perl, you'll find out there's several ways to do things. If you don't like one way, look up another way, and you might like it better. Python, there's only one way to do it, and you're pretty much stuck with it. Anyway, that is an overview of Bash, and now on to declaring variables and getting input and output. Okay, now let's take a look at declaring variables, and let's do a little console input and output. Okay, you see here I have my variable equal Fred, and I'm going to echo it out to the console down here. Now you notice there's no space on either side of the equal sign, and that's important. Okay, run selected text. It says echo my variable Fred, and it does it. Now, if I change that a little bit, and I'll say my var1 space. Okay, and the reason I did that is my var is already defined, so even if this fails, I will still get something out for it. Okay, I'll run okay, and you notice it just sits there and kind of spits it out. It says I can't do that. And the reason it says I can't do that is because you put those spaces in. Now if I take the spaces out, and I can then run it, it thinks it's fine. Oh, by the way, I will now change my var to 3.14, and I'll run it, and you'll say, well, you just had it defined as a text string. It's going to error because it's the wrong type. Well, let's see. Okay, that's where it's still Fred. Okay, run selected text, and it says 3.14, which is not quite irrational, talking about pi. Okay, now you're also seeing here, this is how to echo something out. You say, what happens if I want to put something in? Well, it looks like this. I'm going to run the selected text. It says type something, and it's sitting there looking at me. And I don't know. I'll just say nope. Let's go down. Okay. Let's go back down. Let's go down here and say something. And it prints it out. So that is a prompt to ask it to do something. That's reading it in, and that's putting it back out to the screen. Another thing we'll look at really quickly here is we'll look at grouping code, and we'll find out that Bash groups code. You can use parentheses or you can use brackets. If you use parentheses, you have a subshell. So it's kind of like a subroutine, and anything you declare in there gets forgotten as soon as it closes out. If you have braces, then it's in the current shell context, Now, if you notice if you have it in parentheses, you don't have a semicolon there. When you do have you have the brackets, you have to put a semicolon there, and that's the little things that can run you nuts when you're trying to debug your code. Okay, next thing we'll look at now is an if then else statement. Okay, now we will talk about if then else statements, and we'll talk about the first branch, basically if it is true. Here's where I define my variable, and this is Fred and Wilma from the Flintstones. And what happens is if this variable is equal to Fred, then it'll say Wilma, otherwise it will say no Fred here. And phi is, in Old English, it's Old English for fooey, but in Bash, it's the end of an if statement. The idea is if and then if backwards. Hey, I didn't make it up. Okay, so let's take this and let's run selected text. Okay, since we set this equal to Fred, it calls Wilma. Here it repeats it, then it calls Wilma. Okay, let's try the second one. Second one, I'll change my variable to Barney, and Barney is not Fred, so it should say no Fred here. Let's see what happens. Okay, and it says no Fred here. Okay, now, when I say I'll throw you a curve, look very closely at these quotation marks. You'll find out they're curved because I copied and pasted them from Word. So if you copy and paste something from Word, sometimes you'll run into this problem. It'll run you nuts till you figure out what's going on with it. Run selected check. It said no Fred here. Well, it said no Fred here because you notice it included those little curly quotation marks because it thought it was part of the variable. Okay, and Boots is going to join us for this one. Nope. Cats are cats. Okay. So now you have equality versus assignment, and you have to use equal for numbers. Okay. And we'll run this. And you notice that this is for numbers, so it complains because it said it expected an integer expression, and it wasn't, so it got upset. Now let's see if it will. Let's see if it'll do the other thing that you can, if you're not sure. This happens with PowerShell. That if you notice. Okay. Anyway, so you have just keep in mind the difference between equals and equals spread out. Now, when you do something like PowerShell, you'll also run into this problem. Okay, so we talked a little bit about equality versus assignment. The next step will be to talk about Booleans and how they work in Bash. Hello everybody, and we're back, and we will be talking about Booleans now. Now notice that a Boolean is either true or false, and it's true or false with lowercase t or f. So okay, here we have my Boolean set to true, and we echo it out, and then we test. Now notice I don't say if my Boolean equal true or my Boolean equal false, because what will happen is it'll say if, and then if it's true, it'll say if true, then which of course is true, it'll say yes, and otherwise it'll say no. Anyway, let's run it and see what happens. Okay, here's where it prints out what you tell it, and it prints out true, and it says yes. Okay, the other branch. Okay, so both branches work. Let's try this again. Make sure I have it all. Okay, you notice here it's dropping down to this prompt. Okay, I'll pause real quick. And we're back. I had to clear some things out to cut down the confusion. Okay, this is the false branch. Okay, it says false. It's if when you echo, it says false, and then it says no, as you expect. Okay, next thing we have is a ternary operator. I also heard this referred to as immediate if. Now what happens is you have to be careful about your syntax here, because you notice you have a double parentheses here, and you have the $, which is basically, it says give me the result of this expression. So basically you're evaluating this expression. And how this reads is if b equals 5, notice the double equals there, then 1, 2, 3 other than print 3, 2, 1. Okay, we're going to set b equal to 4. So see what a is. Okay, run selected text. 3, 2, 1, because b is 4, b is not equal to 5, so it switches to 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's redefine b and let's see what happens to a. Okay, 1, 2, 3 as expected. Okay, here's a reference for string manipulation. String manipulation is very, very, very powerful, but it can be very quite involved. And we did a little bit on string expansion, and I'm just going to run this one by one. I'm going to say state your name is Fred. Okay. Now, I'm going to say state your name. Command is not found, because what happens is you don't say the name of the variable, you have to say $, name of variable. Okay, and not only that, you got to say echo. There you go, Fred. Now, if I say echo state your name, it just says state your name, because it does not interpret as a variable. Kind of like the old joke from the radio, say good night, Gracie. Good night, Gracie. Okay, let's do some more echoes here. Okay, this says I Fred, because it did a macro substitution. It did a string expansion. It substituted the string for the variable. Now, if you do this with just single quotes, copy, it does it literally. So be careful about single quotes and double quotes in general when you're learning a language. Sometimes they make a difference, sometimes they don't. Okay, grep, you will have another video which will expand on that quite a bit, so I'll skip on down to the quirks. Okay, and you hear my little kitty. Well, come on up and join us. Yeah. Okay. And here's a quirk. Okay, and I'll just do this one by one. A equals 20. Okay. B equals 5. Okay, let's see equal the contents of A divided by the contents of B. Okay, so far it likes that. Okay, and it says 4. Okay, so far so good. Now watch this. Okay, we have A equals 20 like it was before. Let's set B equal to 3. Okay, let's let C equal A equal B. And echo C, it says 6. So it does not do the decimals. Now, even more interesting, let's let B equal 40. Okay, let's Let C equal A divided by B, echo C, 0. So it's one of the things you got to realize is if you do arithmetic in Bash, it's integer arithmetic. Now what happens if you have to actually do a calculation? You use the BC, which stands for Bash calculator, and there is the reference for that. Okay, that comes to the conclusion of the initial Bash code along. I hope you found this helpful.